The things that once hurt you deeply now feel distant. Not completely gone, but quieter. And that confuses you. Because you remember how intense it used to be. How heavy it felt. How it stayed in your mind all day, and followed you into the night. But now, there's space. And you don't know whether that space means healing. Or something else. Have you ever paused for a moment and wondered, why doesn't this affect me the way it used to? Why do I feel different, but I can't explain how? It's not happiness. At least, not the kind you're used to. It's more like calm. But even that calm feels unfamiliar. Almost uncomfortable. Because you spent so long being in survival mode. That peace feels strange. And maybe there's another feeling too. A quiet kind of emptiness. Not painful. Not overwhelming. Just there. Like something inside you is finished. But nothing new has started yet. And that's the part no one really prepares you for. That moment after the storm. When everything goes silent. You expect relief. You expect clarity. But instead, you're left with questions. Is it really over? Why don't I feel the same anymore? Who am I now, without all that pain? And sometimes, the hardest part isn't what you went through. It's what comes after. Because when the intensity fades, you're left alone with yourself. No distractions. No emotional chaos. Just awareness. And in that awareness, you start noticing things. You notice how certain people don't affect you like before. How situations that once controlled your mood, now pass by quietly. And instead of feeling powerful, it feels unfamiliar. Almost like you've lost a part of yourself. But what if you didn't lose anything? What if something actually ended, exactly the way it was supposed to? And what if this silence you're feeling right now isn't emptiness at all? What if it's something else? Something most people misunderstand. Right at the moment it matters the most? Let's make one thing clear from the beginning. There is nothing wrong with you. Not for feeling overwhelmed before. Not for breaking down the way you did. Not for losing control in moments when everything felt too much. And not even for feeling confused now. Because what you went through was never something you were supposed to already know how to handle. No one teaches you how to process deep emotional pain. No one shows you what to do when your mind is full, your chest feels heavy, and your thoughts won't slow down. Instead, you were taught to keep going. To stay strong. To not overreact. To move on. But moving on, without understanding what happened inside you, creates more pressure, not less. So if you ever felt like you were falling apart, that wasn't weakness. That was a response. A natural, human response to something that affected you deeply. And here's what most people don't realize. When you go through something intense emotionally, mentally, even silently, your mind doesn't just forget it. It adapts. It reshapes. It tries to protect you in the only way it knows how. And sometimes, that protection doesn't look like strength. It looks like confusion. It looks like emotional exhaustion. It looks like distance. It looks like not feeling like yourself anymore. And because no one explains this, you start assuming the worst. You start thinking, why am I like this now? Why can't I go back to how I used to be? Why does everything feel off? But the truth is, you're not supposed to go back. Because the version of you that existed before didn't know what you know now. Didn't feel what you felt. Didn't carry the same awareness. So expecting yourself to return to that version is like expecting growth to reverse itself. And that creates resistance. Because part of you is trying to move forward, while another part is trying to hold on to what feels familiar. And that internal conflict? That's what creates the discomfort you're feeling now. Not because something is wrong, but because something is changing. And real change, doesn't always feel good in the moment. It feels unfamiliar, uncertain, even disorienting. Especially when it happens on the inside, before anything on the outside makes sense. You might look at your life and think, everything is still the same, so why do I feel so different? But that's exactly how it works. The internal shift happens first. Quietly. Subtly. Without permission. And without explanation. And because you can't see it. You question it. You doubt it. You try to fix it. But this isn't something that needs fixing. It's something that needs understanding. Because what you're experiencing right now is not failure. It's not weakness. And it's definitely not you losing yourself. If anything, it's the opposite. It's you moving closer to who you actually are. After everything that tried to shape you into something else. Think about it. Every experience you went through. Every moment that pushed you to your limits. Forced you to see things differently. About people. About situations. About yourself. And once you see something clearly, you can't unsee it. That's why things don't feel the same anymore. That's why certain conversations feel empty. Certain connections feel forced. Certain patterns feel impossible to go back to. Not because you're broken, but because you've outgrown the version of you that once accepted them. And that can feel lonely. Because growth doesn't always come with immediate clarity. Sometimes it comes with distance. Distance from people. Distance from habits. Even distance from your old self. And in that distance, you start to feel like you don't belong anywhere. Not fully in your past. And not fully in your future either. But again, that doesn't mean something is wrong. It means you're in between. And that space, as uncomfortable as it is where real transformation happens. Not when everything is clear. Not when everything feels good. But right here. When you're still trying to understand what changed inside you. So if you've been judging yourself for not feeling the same, for not reacting the same, for not being who you used to be, stop for a moment and consider this instead. What if you didn't lose yourself? What if you moved through something that quietly changed you? In a way that can't be undone? What if the confusion you feel right now is not a sign that you're broken, but a sign that something deeper has already shifted? Because the truth is, you didn't fail that experience. You didn't miss anything. You didn't handle it wrong. You responded the only way you could. With the awareness you had at the time. And now, that awareness has changed. Which means, you have changed. Even if you don't fully understand how yet. And that's okay. You're not behind. You're not lost. You're just seeing things differently now. And learning how to exist with that new perspective. So take the pressure off yourself. You don't need to rush clarity. You don't need to force understanding. And you definitely don't need to go back to who you were. Because where you are right now, as confusing as it feels, is not a mistake. It's part of something deeper. Something most people don't recognize. Until much later. And once you do, everything starts to make sense in a completely different way. At this stage, most people make a mistake that keeps them stuck far longer than necessary. And the hardest part? They don't even realize they're doing it. Because on the surface, it looks like they're trying to heal. It looks like they're trying to move forward. It looks like they're doing everything right. But underneath, they're actually resisting the very shift that's trying to happen. One of the most common patterns is this. Trying to go back to who they used to be. They start thinking, I just want to feel like I did before. I want things to go back to normal. I want to be the old version of myself again. But what they don't understand is that version of them no longer exists. Not because something was taken away, but because something has been added. Awareness. And once awareness enters your life, it changes how everything feels. The same situations don't hit the same. The same people don't feel the same. The same habits don't satisfy you the same way. But instead of accepting that, most people fight it. They try to recreate old emotions. They force themselves into old environments. They reconnect with things that no longer align, just to feel familiar again. And for a moment, it almost works. There's a temporary sense of comfort. A brief illusion that things are back to normal. But it never lasts. Because deep down, something doesn't sit right anymore. And that discomfort? That's not the problem. That's the signal. But instead of listening to it, most people try to silence it. They distract themselves. Constant noise. Constant scrolling. Constant activity. Anything to avoid sitting with that unfamiliar feeling inside. Because silence brings awareness. And awareness forces you to face what has changed. So they stay busy. Not because they're moving forward, but because they're avoiding standing still. And this creates another layer of frustration. Because no matter how much they do, the feeling doesn't go away. That quiet sense of disconnection keeps returning. And then comes another mistake. They start labeling themselves. I think I'm just lost. Something is wrong with me. Why can't I just be happy? But this isn't about being lost. It's about being in transition. And there's a big difference. Being lost means you have no direction. Being in transition means you're leaving one version of yourself before fully becoming the next. But because this space feels unclear, most people misinterpret it. They see discomfort and assume failure. They feel uncertainty and assume something is broken. So they rush to fix it. They look for quick answers, quick clarity, quick emotional relief. But real change doesn't work like that. Because what's happening right now isn't just emotional. It's structural. It's identity level. And identity doesn't shift overnight. It reshapes slowly. Through awareness, through experience, through realization. But here's where it gets even more subtle. Another mistake people make is believing that healing means feeling good all the time. So when they don't feel constant happiness, they assume something is still wrong. But real growth doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it feels neutral. Sometimes it feels quiet. Sometimes it feels like nothing at all. And that's what confuses people the most. Because they're used to intensity. Used to emotional highs and lows. Used to chaos feeling like normal. So when that intensity fades, they don't recognize the new state they're in. They mistake calm for emptiness. They mistake peace for boredom. They mistake stability for losing something. But what they're actually experiencing is the absence of what used to control them. And instead of appreciating that, they try to bring the intensity back. They create unnecessary problems. They overthink simple situations. They revisit old wounds that no longer have power. All just to feel something familiar again. And without realizing it, they pull themselves backward. Not because they're weak, but because the mind prefers what it recognizes, even if it was painful. Familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar peace. And that's why so many people stay stuck in cycles. Not because they can't move forward, but because forward doesn't feel familiar yet. So they return to what they know. Even if it no longer serves them. Even if it quietly drains them. Even if it keeps them from evolving. And then they wonder. Why does it feel like I'm not progressing? But progress isn't always about doing more. Sometimes, it's about allowing what's already changing to settle. And that's the part most people skip. They don't allow the shift to stabilize. They interrupt it. They question it too early. They judge it too quickly. They try to control it instead of understanding it. But what if this phase you're in right now doesn't need to be rushed? What if the discomfort you feel is not something to escape, but something to observe? Because when you stop trying to force clarity, you start to see what's actually happening. You start to notice patterns. You start to recognize the difference between what feels aligned and what only feels familiar. And slowly, without forcing it, things begin to make sense. Not all at once. Not in a dramatic way. But in small, quiet realizations. The kind that don't shout, but stay with you. And once you see it, you can't go back to misunderstanding it. But to reach that point, you have to stop doing what most people do. You have to stop trying to go backward. Stop trying to force emotions. Stop trying to label yourself too quickly. And instead, allow yourself to sit in this space, without immediately trying to escape it. Because this space, as uncomfortable as it may feel, is not where you're stuck. It's where something is being redefined. Something deeper than just emotions. Something that most people never take the time to understand. And once you do, you begin to see this entire experience in a completely different way. There's a deeper reason behind everything you've been feeling. A pattern. A principle. Something that operates quietly in the background of your life, whether you're aware of it or not. And once you begin to understand it, what once felt confusing starts to feel precise. Intentional. Almost structured. Because what you've been experiencing isn't random. It follows a law. A law that has been observed, taught, and repeated in different ways for years. But rarely understood at a practical level. The idea is simple. Your life does not respond to what you say you want. It responds to who you believe you are. Not consciously, but at a deeper level, beneath your thoughts, beneath your effort, beneath your intentions. And this is where most people get it wrong. They focus on changing outcomes, without realizing that outcomes are only reflections. Reflections of identity. Reflections of internal beliefs. Reflections of what the mind has accepted as true. And this is exactly what begins to shift during intense emotional experiences. Moments of pressure. Moments of pain. Moments where everything feels like it's breaking. Because in those moments, the surface layer of who you think you are starts to crack. The usual patterns don't hold. The automatic responses don't feel right. The identity you've been operating from starts to lose its grip. And when that happens, something deeper begins to reorganize. Not immediately. Not visibly. But internally. Your mind begins to question old assumptions. Old emotional reactions weaken. Old attachments start to loosen. And this creates a temporary state where you don't fully identify with who you used to be. But you haven't fully stabilized into who you're becoming either. And that's the space you're in right now. Not broken. Not lost. But in between identities. And according to this principle, this phase is not only normal. It's necessary. Because before your external reality can shift, your internal identity must change first. Always. There are no exceptions to this. You can try to force change on the outside. You can chase new situations, new people, new environments. But if the internal identity remains the same, the patterns will repeat. Maybe in different forms. Maybe with different faces. But the core experience will stay familiar. Because life is not responding to the situation itself. It's responding to the version of you experiencing it. And this is why intense emotional periods are so powerful. Not because they hurt, but because they interrupt the old identity. They break patterns you didn't even realize you were repeating. They force awareness. And awareness is what begins the shift. But here's the part most people don't see. This shift doesn't feel like progress. At least not at first. It feels like confusion. Like disconnection. Like you're no longer anchored to anything solid. And that's because your mind is no longer operating from its previous structure. But hasn't fully stabilized into a new one yet. It's reorganizing. Quietly. Behind the scenes. And during this process, your perception begins to change. You start seeing things differently. Reacting differently. Prioritizing differently. But because the external world hasn't caught up yet, it creates a mismatch. Internally, you're shifting. Externally, things look the same. And that gap is what creates the discomfort. Because you're no longer fully aligned with your current reality. But you haven't stepped into a new one yet. So it feels like you're floating. Detached. Uncertain. But according to this principle, this is actually a sign that something is working. That something has already begun. Even if you can't fully see it yet. Because the moment identity shifts, reality has no choice but to follow. Not instantly, but inevitably. And this is where patience becomes important. Not passive waiting, but understanding. Because if you misinterpret this phase, you'll try to fix what isn't broken. You'll try to return to old patterns, old reactions, old versions of yourself that no longer fit. And that creates resistance. It slows the natural process. But if you understand what's happening, you stop interfering. You stop forcing clarity. You stop trying to rush into a new identity before it stabilizes. And instead, you allow the shift to complete itself. And that's when things begin to align. Gradually. Naturally. Without force. Because once the internal identity becomes clear, your decisions change. Your reactions change. Your boundaries change. And through those changes, your external life begins to reorganize. Not through effort alone, but through alignment. And this is what was meant by the idea that life responds to the certainty behind you. Not just your words. Because when identity is clear, you don't need to convince anything. You don't need to chase. You don't need to force outcomes. Your presence alone begins to reflect a different state. A different standard. A different way of existing. And life responds accordingly. But before all of that becomes visible, there's always this phase. This quiet, uncertain, in-between stage. Where nothing seems clear. But everything is actually shifting. And once you understand this, you stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" And start asking something far more accurate. What is changing within me that I haven't fully recognized yet? Because that question is what opens the door to everything that comes next. Including something most people completely overlook. Right after they pass through their most difficult experiences. At this point, something needs to be said clearly. Not as an idea. Not as a possibility. But as something real. You didn't just go through something painful. You passed something. And that changes everything. Because most people spend their time trying to escape pain, without ever realizing that some experiences are not meant to be avoided. They are meant to be completed, lived through, processed fully. And once they are, they leave something behind. Not damage, not weakness, but transformation. And the moment you pass through that kind of experience, something inside you shifts permanently. Even if you don't notice it immediately. Even if you can't explain it yet. Even if it feels confusing. Because passing a deep emotional test doesn't look dramatic. It doesn't come with an announcement. There's no clear moment where everything suddenly makes sense. Instead, it shows up quietly. In the way you feel. In the way you respond. In the way certain things no longer affect you the same way they used to. And that's the part most people miss. They think the absence of intensity means nothing happened. But in reality, it means everything happened. You're no longer reacting from the same place. You're no longer holding onto the same emotional patterns. You're no longer seeing the world through the same lens. And that's not something you forced. That's something you moved through. Which means, the test is no longer active. Think about it. When you're inside a difficult phase, everything feels overwhelming. Your mind keeps returning to the same thoughts. Your emotions feel intense, unpredictable. Your reactions feel automatic. It's like you're inside the experience, with no distance from it. But now, there's space. You can observe your thoughts, instead of being controlled by them. You can feel emotions, without being consumed by them. You can see situations, without immediately reacting. That distance is not disconnection. It's awareness. And awareness is what remains. After something has been processed. After something has been understood, at a deeper level. And that's why things feel different now. Not because something is missing, but because something has been resolved. Internally. Quietly. Without needing external confirmation. But here's where clarity becomes important. Passing the most painful test of your life doesn't mean everything becomes perfect. It doesn't mean you'll never feel discomfort again. It doesn't mean life suddenly becomes easy. What it means is this. The version of you that once struggled in that exact way no longer exists. You've moved beyond that state. You've seen too much. Felt too much. Understood too much. To go back to reacting the same way again. And that's why certain things feel different now. Why old triggers feel weaker. Why old fears don't hold the same weight. Why old patterns feel unnatural to return to. Because they belong to a version of you that you are no longer operating as. And this is where the title becomes real. 7 Signs You've Passed the Most Painful Test of Your Life is not about something dramatic. It's about something subtle. Recognizable only when you stop looking for intensity and start noticing change. Because these signs are not loud. They don't demand attention. They appear quietly. In your daily experience. In small moments. In subtle shifts. In the way you think, feel, and respond. Without even trying. And once you recognize them, everything starts to make sense. The confusion you felt earlier begins to fade. Because now you understand that what you were experiencing was not something going wrong. It was something completing a cycle, an internal process, a test that didn't need to be announced. Because its result shows up in who you've become. And that realization changes how you see yourself. Instead of thinking, I'm lost, you begin to see, I've changed. Instead of asking, what's wrong with me? You begin to ask, What have I moved through that I didn't fully recognize? And that shift in perspective is the beginning of clarity. Because once you understand that you've passed something, you stop trying to fix yourself. You stop trying to return to the past. You stop trying to force emotions that no longer belong to you. And instead, you begin to observe. You begin to notice. You begin to recognize the evidence that something inside you has already transformed. And that's where the next step begins. Not in effort. Not in struggle. But in awareness. Because there are clear signs. Specific, undeniable patterns that show up when someone has moved through the most difficult phase of their life. And once you see them, you won't question yourself the same way again. You won't doubt the shift. You won't misinterpret the calm. You'll recognize it for what it truly is. Not emptiness. Not confusion. But proof. Proof that something inside you has already changed. In a way that can't be undone. And now, it's time to see those signs clearly. A few weeks ago, a woman came to me quietly, almost afraid to speak. She had gone through a period of deep personal loss, an ending that left her life fragmented in ways she didn't fully understand. Every day felt like walking through fog, and she couldn't see how she would ever feel whole again. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, I began to notice subtle changes. She no longer reacted with the same intensity to situations that would have once drained her completely. Her energy, once scattered and frayed, seemed to settle naturally. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. And yet, it was undeniable. She had passed through the pain, and she carried the evidence of it in the way she existed in the world. Another example comes from a man I worked with who had endured years of career disappointments. Each setback chipped away at his confidence, leaving him uncertain and hesitant. He tried all the usual methods, planning, strategizing, forcing outcomes, but nothing aligned. Over time, however, a shift occurred. He began to notice that he no longer feared failure the way he used to. Challenges that once felt overwhelming now seemed like small steps in a much larger process. Opportunities appeared differently, not because the world had changed, but because he had changed. His internal transformation was visible in his calm responses, the steady way he made decisions, and the quiet certainty that replaced his previous anxiety. Others noticed it too. Colleagues who had once dismissed him as unsure now sought his perspective, sensing the inner strength he carried without needing to display it. There's also a story of a young artist who had struggled with self-doubt for years. Every project seemed to expose inadequacy, every critique felt like confirmation of failure. After a particularly intense season of personal and professional challenges, she noticed something remarkable. She no longer compared herself to others. She no longer allowed criticism to define her. Instead, she worked with a quiet assurance, producing art that resonated deeply, not because she was seeking approval, but because she had aligned with her own creative voice. The people around her began to respond differently, drawn to the authenticity she now embodied. Her success wasn't the sudden achievement of fame or fortune, it was the internal evidence that she had passed through her test and emerged with clarity, resilience, and self-trust. These stories illustrate a common pattern. When someone passes through the most painful tests of life, the changes are subtle yet profound. They are visible in daily choices, in reactions to situations, and in interactions with others. People begin to protect their energy naturally. They stop investing in what no longer serves them. They speak differently, act differently, and exist differently, not out of ego, but out of alignment with the deeper version of themselves that the test revealed. The pain they endured no longer controls them. Instead, it becomes a silent teacher, shaping responses, guiding decisions, and redefining identity. The proof is not always dramatic. It rarely comes as a single moment of triumph. Most often, it comes in the quiet, consistent ways that a person moves through life after hardship. They feel emotionally lighter, even if exhausted. They see relationships more clearly. They act from intuition rather than impulse. They are less reactive, more present, and increasingly capable of navigating complexity with calm authority. Others notice it, even if they can't explain it. There's an unmistakable difference in the energy they carry, a resonance that comes from having endured, having learned, and having shifted internally. And once this internal alignment occurs, external life inevitably begins to reflect it. Challenges still come, but they are met differently. Opportunities still appear, but they are evaluated with wisdom rather than fear. And most importantly, the individual recognizes themselves anew, not as the person who suffered, but as the one who emerged, tested and transformed, carrying proof of resilience in every choice and every moment of quiet presence. Now that you've passed through the most intense phase of your life, the question becomes, what do you do with this new awareness? How do you apply it so that it transforms not just how you feel internally, but how you live every single day? Because passing a test isn't just about surviving it, it's about learning from it, integrating it, and allowing it to guide your choices moving forward. The first step is to stop trying to force clarity. You don't need to have all the answers. The lessons of deep pain are not delivered all at once, they arrive gradually, in small, subtle ways. Take a moment each day to pause, to breathe, and to simply notice how you feel without judgment. Observe your thoughts without reacting. Watch your emotions without trying to fix them. This quiet awareness is not empty, it is the very tool that allows internal transformation to stabilize. It is in these moments of calm observation that you begin to recognize your own growth. Next, start paying attention to your energy. Notice where it naturally flows and where it gets drained. This is one of the clearest indicators of who and what aligns with your current self. You no longer have to push yourself to please others or to maintain relationships that no longer serve you. Boundaries are no longer something to feel guilty about, they are a natural expression of the self you've become. In practical terms, this might mean saying no to commitments that feel heavy, stepping back from conversations that feel draining, or limiting interactions with people who bring chaos instead of clarity. Each time you honor your energy, you reinforce the identity shift that has already begun inside of you. Another practical application is to speak from certainty rather than explanation. When fear, doubt, or old patterns arise, resist the urge to justify, explain, or negotiate your feelings. Instead, respond with calm assurance. For instance, if you're in a situation that would have once triggered panic, pause and respond with simple certainty, I know what I need right now, or I am moving forward with clarity. This doesn't mean ignoring emotions, it means acting from the deeper version of yourself that has passed the test, rather than from the reactive patterns of the past. Over time, this builds internal trust and reinforces the quiet authority you now carry. Integrate daily rituals that support reflection and grounding. Journaling, meditation, mindful walking, or even short pauses to connect with your breath can anchor you in the awareness you've gained. These practices don't have to be elaborate. Consistency is far more powerful than duration. By consistently observing and grounding yourself, you allow the lessons of your past pain to embed fully into your identity. Each day becomes a chance to witness the subtle signs of growth, the reduced intensity of reactions, the calm and difficult conversations, the natural clarity in decision-making. Next, experiment with applying this awareness to action. Start with small decisions, how you respond to challenges, how you prioritize your time, how you interact with people. Notice when old patterns try to reassert themselves, and consciously choose the response that aligns with your transformed self. This is not about perfection, it's about practice. Each intentional choice strengthens the internal shift and gradually reshapes your external life. Finally, trust the process. Transformation rarely comes with visible markers. It is often quiet, subtle, and cumulative. Allow yourself to move through life without the need for immediate proof. The signs are there, in your energy, your reactions, and your calm presence, but they manifest gradually. Life responds to the certainty you now carry internally, even if the external results take time to align. By applying these principles daily, you begin to live in a way that honors your growth. You no longer chase what no longer serves you. You no longer force reactions that belong to an earlier version of yourself. Instead, you move with calm authority, guided by awareness, aligned with your evolved identity. And over time, this approach shapes not just your internal world, but your entire life experience. The pain you endured no longer controls you. It has served its purpose, leaving behind clarity, strength, and a quiet power that will continue to guide you in every decision, every relationship, and every challenge you face. Now that you have moved through the most challenging experiences of your life, the final step is understanding who you have become in the process. This is more than just a feeling, it is an identity shift. The person you were before would have reacted differently. They would have been controlled by fear, uncertainty, or past patterns. But now, having passed the test, you carry something profoundly different within you, a quiet authority, an unshakable clarity, and a sense of self that is no longer defined by what happens outside of you. You are no longer someone who reacts immediately to circumstances. Instead, you respond. There is a difference, subtle but immense. Where once your emotions dictated your actions, now your awareness guides them. This does not mean you are emotionless, it means you are aligned. You feel, you observe, you act with intention. And that alignment changes everything. Your decisions are no longer reactions, they are expressions of the person you've become. This new identity shows up in the simplest moments. When faced with a difficult conversation, you speak with calm assurance rather than defensiveness. When confronted with uncertainty, you pause and assess rather than panic. When challenges arise, you act from a place of quiet certainty rather than desperation. Each small choice reinforces the internal shift and communicates to the world the presence of someone who has passed through profound difficulty and emerged intact. Your relationships also transform naturally. You no longer tolerate negativity or energy-draining dynamics. You no longer allow people to impose their emotional chaos onto you. And at the same time, your empathy deepens. You can connect with others without absorbing their tension. You can offer support without losing your own balance. Your presence becomes a stabilizing force, both to yourself and to those around you. People notice it even if they cannot articulate why. There is a subtle authority in how you exist, and it commands respect without needing to demand it. One of the most powerful aspects of this transformation is your relationship with your past. You no longer carry it as a burden. The pain, the struggles, the lessons, they are no longer chains, they are tools. You carry them as evidence that you endured, that you learned, that you are resilient. And because of this, fear loses its grip. You know, deep down, that you have already faced the most intense challenges life could offer. You understand that even if difficulty arises again, you have the strength and awareness to navigate it. Your priorities change as well. You no longer chase validation, material markers, or superficial achievements. Instead, you invest in what aligns with your evolved identity. Your actions reflect your values and your inner authority. Your time, energy, and attention are carefully curated to serve your growth and your peace. And as you live this way, life begins to mirror this internal alignment. Opportunities, people, and circumstances naturally resonate with the person you have become, not the person you were. This is also where purpose emerges. You begin to operate from a higher level of understanding. The test you passed was not just personal, it has equipped you to influence the world in ways that are aligned, authentic, and powerful. You can see the lessons others need without forcing guidance. You can offer insight without over-explaining. Your presence itself carries a quiet teaching, showing that resilience, clarity, and calm authority are not only possible, they are achievable after profound challenge. And finally, the most important realization, you are not here to beg life for validation or change. You are not here to plead for circumstances to align with your desires. You are here to embody certainty, awareness, and authority. You are here to exist in a way that reflects the lessons you have endured and the strength you have cultivated. Each moment is an opportunity to act in alignment with this identity. Each decision reinforces your transformation. Each interaction communicates the quiet power you now carry. So take a moment and recognize it. Recognize that you are not the same person who entered the storm. You are someone who has passed the test, someone who carries clarity, calm, and authority in every aspect of life. You have shifted, grown, and evolved. And from this place, you can move forward with confidence, knowing that your life is no longer dictated by external events, but by the internal certainty that emerges from passing the most painful test of your life. You are whole. You are aligned. You are ready.